Today on CityCast Philly, we have the latest polls on Philly and the presidential race, how SEPTA is cracking down on people jumping those turnstiles. And yes, it's Red October. The Phillies start their playoff run this weekend, but will the stadium workers' strike continue? It's Tuesday, October 1st. I'm Trenae Nuri, and here's what Philly's talking about. Joining me this week is Asha Prihar, our Hey Philly newsletter editor. Hey, Asha.
Hi, Trenae.
And introducing Matt Katz, our new executive producer. Matt, welcome to CityCast Philly. It's so great to have you on the team.
Thank you so much, Trenae. So fun to be hanging out with you and Asha this morning. Can't wait to talk about the news.
Yes, and we'll be learning more about you as we go on this week. All right, let's get into some of the news. We got to start off with the biggest news story in the country, and that's the presidential race. Matt, you've been digging into some of the recent polling. What do we know about how things stand locally when it comes to Donald Trump and Kamala Harris?
Yeah, I like to check out the Real Clear Politics website. It has this average of all the polls, and I looked at it to see where Pennsylvania was. The average in Pennsylvania of all the polls shows Harris up over Trump by 0.1%. I mean, this is basically as close as you can possibly get. Pretty incredible. In Philly, as you can imagine, Harris is destroying Trump because it's a Democratic stronghold, and that's why Harris is spending so much time here and will continue to spend time here. She needs all of those Democratic voters to turn out in order to win the state. The last Philadelphia Inquirer, New York Times, Siena College poll that looked specifically at Philly had Harris with a 63-point lead in the city. And the most important thing about that is she was doing better in Philly than Joe Biden was doing when he was the candidate in the race. So
interesting.
That's good news for her. That shows some momentum potentially. And maybe the best news for her in Philly is that her favorability rating is up 10% to 77% compared to where it had been a few years ago. So she's, I guess, increasingly popular. Still, there are definitely some questions that people have about whether there's enough enthusiasm, particularly when it comes to young voters, to really counter Trump's total dominance in some of the counties between Philly and Pittsburgh. And that might be really what we're focusing on in the coming weeks. So right now, just as tight as you can possibly get. And I don't know if that changes anytime soon.
Right. And both candidates, Harris and Trump, got cheesesteaks, so it's not like we can make a judgment on that. I'm bringing cheesesteaks back this week. I think one way we can tell that the race is so tight in Pennsylvania is when you turn on the TV or YouTube and you see nothing but a political ad for Trump or Harris. Asha, have you seen as many of these ads on TV or social media?
Oh my goodness, yes. So I am a regular Jeopardy viewer. And love Jeopardy.
Nice.
The commercials during that broadcast, in sort of like non-election times, they're usually dominated by like medication commercials to the point where I actually have some of these like memorized. Anyway, but now, right now, what it feels like is just wall-to-wall political ads during the commercial breaks with the occasional medication commercial sprinkled in. I've been seeing lots for the Senate race between David McCormick and Senator Bob Casey. And of course, plenty for the presidential election. I'll just say, I really hope these aren't the only information that like most Pennsylvania voters are going on when they're deciding who to support. Like a lot of them just lack context in many cases. It's kind of alarming. But yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm feeling burnt out on these.
Right.
And you're totally right. They really lack context. They're fear-mongering. They're almost like just some of them are just over the top. And then it is nonstop. I was watching, unfortunately, the Eagles game on Sunday, which they got walloped and looked terrible.
Yeah.
We can talk about that another time. But the commercials were just blanketed with these political ads. And here's a little bit of what I heard and what everybody in the Philadelphia region heard on Sunday.
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners. Kamala's for they, them. President Trump is for you.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
Kamala Harris will cut taxes for working people, and she'll lower everyday costs by taking on price gouging. Trump fights for billionaires like him.
Kamala Harris has always put criminals first. Don't make America her next victim.
She worked her way up.
I had a summer job at McDonald's.
He was born there. I'm very rich.
We are helping big families out of debt by telling billionaires to pay their fares.
I have a perfect hack to all of this. You take your remote and you go mute.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you walk away.
Right.
And you get more food. And then you bring that food to the couch or you get a drink. And you enjoy your Sunday.
So true, Trenae.
But then you have to watch the Eagles, though. Then
I know, and then that
mute the commercials. Then you have to turn off the Eagles, and that's a whole other problem. I mean, it is mind-boggling how much money is spent to put this noise in our ears. The Wall Street Journal had a story last month that between July and August, something like $110 million was spent on advertising by the presidential campaigns just in the swing states, and $42 million just in Pennsylvania. It's crazy. And now that the race here is pretty much closer than anywhere, the bombardment is just going to continue. It might get even worse. We have 19 electoral college votes, more than any other swing state, and the campaigns think the way they get those votes is by just drowning us in this noise.
Wow, we're so special.
Are we?
Don't you guys feel special?
Sure. Besides the presidential race, as Asha mentioned earlier, we have another huge race in Pennsylvania, and that's between incumbent Democratic Senator Bob Casey versus hedge fund CEO Dave McCormick. Is that race just as tight, Matt?
Yeah, Casey has a bigger lead in Pennsylvania than Harris does. The Real Clear Politics average has Casey up 4.4% over his Republican challenger, which is smaller than it was over the summer, so that might be tightening. Although we haven't in this race seen some of the controversies or scandals or lightning rod issues specific to Pennsylvania that tend to give down ballot races more attention. So if things stay relatively quiet, I imagine that would be good for the incumbent, for Casey. But if Trump wins the state, you can certainly see Trump's coattails extending to McCormick, to the Republican on the ticket, and Casey getting kicked out of office.
Right. Now, we will continue to talk about these races as we get closer to Election Day. More news after the break. All right, let's get into some more stories. Asha, I know you take SEPTA around the city. Matt, do you take SEPTA a lot? And sometimes, do you see people jumping turnstiles?
Yeah, I mean, I take the Broad Street line sometimes, once in a while, the 17 bus. You don't see it on the bus as much. I haven't seen people like just walk on the bus and blow off the driver. Although I'm sure that happens. I know that happens.
Right, but sometimes people say, like, they kind of like, hey, I don't have it. And then they ask the bus driver.
Pat in the pockets.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they let them go generally, right? Is that what you've seen?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've definitely seen them like pop over the turnstiles or pop onto the turnstiles. That's like a regular thing for sure.
Right. And SEPTA announced that they're actually going to be cracking down on that by installing 8-foot-tall glass fare gates at some more station stops. Apparently, these gates have been considered a success at the 69th Street Transit Center. So SEPTA announced that it is expanding this pilot program.
Yeah, Trenae, they're going to put 100 gates at 9 more stations. It costs about $7 million to install the gates, and they're going to put them at Somerset, Huntington, Cecil B. Moore, 11th Street, 13th Street, Frankfurt Transit Center, Allegheny, 52nd Street, and City Hall stations.
We talked about this on the show this summer about how SEPTA police are no longer issuing summary citations for fare evasion. Instead, non-paying riders are going to be sent to court, and that's when they'll meet a judge to determine if they get a fine or if they have to serve some time through community service hours or deal with other penalties.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me that they're clearly recriminalizing this thing that they had decriminalized a few years ago. There was this idea in the wake of criminal justice reforms and this movement in the country that minor crimes shouldn't be policed as aggressively because people in poverty and young people end up getting locked up for things that maybe don't require incarceration. And that has all these negative consequences for families and communities. But the pendulum is swinging back here, right? Trenae, you sent me this video from KYW of a woman who is accused of jumping the turnstile, and then I just watched her get pushed by a cop. And this is a different tactic. I mean, I don't take SEPTA every day, and I'm sure there are other views, and people probably feel like if they're paying riders, they're probably pissed off that so many people can get away with not paying. So maybe they're happy with that. But some of the aggressive tactics certainly have other consequences.
From a personal standpoint, like Trenae said, I'm a regular SEPTA rider. I don't own a car, so I largely rely on the system. And, I'm also hyper aware of all these funding issues that SEPTA has been facing. So, I do think it's a good goal to get as many people to pay their fare as possible.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Just this weekend, I saw a bunch of people entering through the back door on the bus, sort of speaking to what we were talking about earlier.
Right.
So that they didn't have to pay.
Yeah.
People have done that for years.
Yeah. And honestly, as someone who is riding the bus and, often will stand at a bus stop waiting for a long time for a bus to come because, operator shortages, stuff like that, it made me really frustrated. Because, it's clear that getting public transit funding out of the state government is a challenge, to say the least. Even though the Pennsylvania budget passed back in July, we're still waiting on a possible deal for more transit funding this fall. So really, I kind of see this as all part of this bigger picture where SEPTA needs money to function. And people just deciding that they don't want to pay is detrimental to everyone who takes the subway or the bus or the trolley, including themselves, honestly. Maybe the city should look into expanding their zero fare program, which is a pilot program that was launched a couple years ago that provides free SEPTA passes to 25,000 Philadelphians living around or below the poverty line. But yeah, this question of how to get everyone paying or having their fares paid in some other way, it's kind of something I think that requires a lot of nuance. I saw in the news about this incident in Brooklyn where a confrontation between police and somebody who hopped a turnstile ended in 4 people getting shot.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So to me, that kind of signals that sort of physical infrastructure that would prevent these kinds of confrontations from happening in the first place would probably be preferable to kind of just, deploying a bunch of transit cops. I am pro anything that makes SEPTA better because I don't want to be late to my doctor's appointments,
Oh, yeah, for sure. We've got more news after the break. All right, Matt, I know that Sunday was disappointing for us, but we've got a big week coming up in Philadelphia sports. The Phillies playoff run begins this Saturday, especially now that the Birds blew it and looked terrible in the process on Sunday. The Phillies are all we've got right now.
Yes. Waiting on the NBA season, hoping things get better in the NFL season, but things looked bad on Sunday.
We just need Smith and Brown to get healthy and get back.
Some would say we also need a new coach, but
stuff, yeah.
But forget about the Eagles for a moment.
Okay.
The Phillies are looking really good. First series in the playoffs is this weekend on Saturday. It's the National League Division Series. We don't exactly know who they're playing yet. They have a bye for the first round, so we have to see who comes out of that. This will be a best-of-5 situation. Then it's on to the NLCS, the National League Championship Series, best-of-7, and then the World Series. So buckle up. This team really does look ready to go all the way. Had one of the best records in baseball this year. The chemistry in the clubhouse is off the charts. And home field advantage in the first round. So game 1, Citizens Bank Park, on Saturday. Playoff tickets, by the way, are very expensive and also hard to get.
No, I'm going to stay home or, go somewhere to watch it. I do not have the money for these tickets, but I don't know. If anyone is listening and wants to hook a sister up, hook me up. But Asha, you've been paying attention to another story that's wrapped up in all of this.
Last week, workers for Aramark, which runs the concessions at Citizens Bank Park and the Link and Wells Fargo Center, they went on strike. So workers told the news site More Perfect Union that there's more than 1,500 people who work at these 3 venues, and some of them just don't get healthcare through their employer. Aramark, for context, is this huge food services company based in Philly. And, Philly's a union town. So it'll be interesting to see how this strike plays out, especially, as the playoffs are going on. Unite Here 274, which is the concession workers union, they're trying to get what they say is their fair shake. They want a new contract with higher wages and healthcare. And they also want people going to games and concerts at any of these venues to boycott the concession stands. According to the Inquirer, Aramark has had corporate employees on standby to work the stands when there have been events at these venues.
Interesting.
But apparently some unionized workers have actually been showing up to work in spite of the strike.
I've kind of wondered about that. Why is that?
Yeah, so the union told the Inquirer that, quote, the majority of members are striking, but they did expect some percentage of workers, that's a quote, to come to work anyway, since many of them are living paycheck to paycheck. So, it's very possible that a lot of people are coming to work because they need the money. So,
right.
Yeah, it kind of, I think, raises questions about how effective a strike can be when that is the case. But I guess, we'll be watching it. We'll see how this all plays out.
Yeah, they're going to try to get people to tailgate in the parking lot beforehand, drink your beers before the game, and then don't buy concessions inside. It's a little bit of a tough task. It's a long game. You might need some water. You might get hungry, but that's part of the efforts here. So it's another interesting dynamic that might be continuing to go down, through the playoffs and at the other stadiums as the Eagles season proceeds and as the 76er season starts.
Right. Now, before we go, Asha, you've got some Phillies trivia for us.
I do. I will start off by saying, disclaimer, if you know me, you know I'm not the sportiest person in the world. I am more of a distant observer, a tangential appreciator of the culture and the vibes that we see in the city and around the region when our teams do well. So I appreciate what's going on right now. But I will say, I did grow up in a Philly sports household, so I'd like to thank my big brother, who is a lifelong diehard Phillies fan, for helping me come up with some of these trivia questions.
Nice.
Big shout out to him.
Let's go, big bro. What do you got?
Okay, so question 1. Which former Phillies player holds the record for being the fastest in MLB history to reach 100 career home runs? This player is also the namesake of a character on a popular sitcom.
Is it Mike Schmidt?
Is it Ryan Howard?
You got it, Trenae.
Whoa!
Yes. So Ryan Howard hit his 100th home run in the major leagues on June 27th, 2007, which was his 325th game. And no one has beat that record since, according to the MLB's website. So,
wow.
Good job, Trenae. Nice. Wait, what sitcom is Ryan Howard?
Yeah, I was to say,
okay.
What?
Yeah, looping back around to that hint, it turns out that BJ Novak's character on The Office, who is named Ryan Howard, was actually named after the baseball player, which is actually pretty interesting considering that the show premiered in 2005, which was when Ryan Howard, the baseball player, was still a rookie. He actually played for one of their minor league affiliates, the Scranton Wilkes-Barre Red Barons.
Ah.
Yes. And The Office is set in Scranton. Love all these connections here.
That's such a random fact to whip out. So yeah, hey, say these facts when you're at the tailgates.
Yeah, right.
Nobody will know that I'm actually not a sports fan. All right. So you guys ready for question number 2?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. I don't want to be too negative here, but I have learned very recently when I was putting this trivia together that it is possible to call the Phillies the losingest team in history, at least by one definition. So my question for you is, which of the following records do the Phillies hold? A, most games lost ever. B, lowest all-time winning percentage. C, most losses in a single season.
I think it's that because they've been around for so long, and I remember there being a story recently that they hit, I think they're like 10,000th loss. So I'm going to say they have the most losses ever.
What are you thinking, Trenae?
So I don't know where I saw this, but there was a image of Harper, Stott, and the player with the big beard,
Marsh,
wearing, I don't know if it was like a real picture of them or if it was like a sketch, but they were wearing like those Letterman sweaters, those like varsity sweaters, and it was paying homage to like some of the original Phillies players from way back in the day.
Yeah.
And so, using all that information, the Phillies have been around for a long time. So I'm going to say, I think it's A.
You guys are both right. That is amazing airtight logic right there. Yes, the Phillies have lost, this is a really big number, 11,326 games throughout their history. And that's actually the highest of any sports team, not just baseball. But, you can probably chalk that up to the fact that, first of all, it is an extremely old team. And also baseball has tons of games per season.
Right.
All right. For this last question, which I actually made this one up myself, we're going to throw it back to the last time the Phillies won the World Series in 2008.
I remember.
Which of the following artists/music groups did not sing the national anthem at one of the World Series games in 2008?
Oh, my God.
A, Taylor Swift. B, the Backstreet Boys. C, Patti LaBelle. D, Tim McGraw. Testing your memory here.
Well, wait, let's put our heads together, Trenae.
Okay.
I mean, Miss Patty had to have done it, right?
Classic Philadelphian,
totally.
Renowned Philadelphian.
I remember seeing video of a young Taylor Swift at some point, who's also from Pennsylvania. So
right.
I remember seeing video of her singing the national anthem at a Phillies game, but I don't know if it was then.
Right, because I was about to say, did she have the status of that she has now of 2008? I do not think so.
Yeah, I don't think so. It was too long ago. It was like 16 years ago.
Now, Tim McGraw seems like the vibe, but also I don't know if Tim McGraw is more like football. And then the Backstreet Boys, that one is tricky too.
I think Taylor Swift would have been too young.
Too young. Right.
Is that your answer? Final answer?
Are we doing a combined final answer?
Yeah, let's combine it. All
right.
We're gonna lock in on Taylor Swift. Bing. Lock it in.
No, it was not. Taylor Swift was indeed singing. She was about 2 years into her career at that point. She grew up actually singing the national anthem at Reading Phillies games. So I don't know if that has anything to do with how she ended up there. No idea, but she was there. The answer is actually Tim McGraw.
Your instinct was right, Trenae. That was my bad.
Tim McGraw's dad, Tug McGraw, was actually a relief pitcher for the Phillies and pitched the final strikeout of the game that won the 1980 World Series for the Phillies, which, as you may know, is the only other time they've won that title. Unfortunately, Tug McGraw died of cancer in 2004, and Tim actually spread some of his dad's ashes on the mound before the start of Game 3.
Wow, that's so special.
Yeah, I was reading some old news articles, and one of them was like, there was an extra man on the field that night for the Phillies. But yeah, it was really sweet. Coincidentally, that was actually the same game where Taylor Swift, whose first single back in 2006 was called Tim McGraw, sang the national anthem. No idea if that was planned at all.
This is too much. I'm overwhelmed.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe she'll be back with her future brother-in-law, Jason Kelce, to one of the Phillies playoff games.
Wouldn't that be something?
However, when she comes to a Philadelphia Eagles game, it's not good for us. Bring Mama Donna, but not Taylor.
Got it.
I have no beef with Taylor, but just don't. Just stay out in the parking lot until the game is over. All right. That was Asha Prihar, our Hey Philly newsletter editor, and Matt Katz, our executive producer. Thank you both so much for joining me on CityCast Philly.
Thanks, guys. That was fun.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Trenae.
That's all for today here on CityCast Philly. How well did you do with that Phillies trivia? Try some of those out while you're watching the game this weekend. Also, rate the show, leave us a review, and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to sign up for our morning newsletter, Hey Philly, to learn more about what else Philly's talking about. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye. Are you going?
I'm not going.
Okay.
Trenae, we could talk about this another time, but I have a problem with the Phillies.
What do you mean?
Well, I went to elementary school in Queens when the Mets won the World Series, so I'm sort of a Mets fan. I am a Mets fan.
Oh my gosh.
I know I shouldn't really
it's
be the executive producer of CityCast Philly, should I? That's why I didn't tell anybody that before I started here.